Welcome to part two of our special election coverage, election 2020 coverage. For those of you that were here for the first part, you realize that everything is cyclical. We are dealing with things today that have happened in our country's past. Hopefully, we can avert the terrible outcomes that happened in the past. But it is important that you vote and that you urge everyone that you know to vote. Your life depends on it. Your children's lives depend upon it. This is an important time. We are at a crossroads in the history of this country. I'm going to now introduce you to John Mason. And John Mason plays Lyndon Johnson. He's a member of the ensemble cast, and he frequently plays Lyndon Johnson on our show. John?
Hi, I'm John Mason, and I have played very many important historical figures in American history, including the 36th President of the United States, Lyndon Baines Johnson. My fellow Americans, issues that I had hoped had been resolved during my administration have arisen. Racism has become totally blatant in our public discussions. Currently occupying the White House, the same White House that many great men have occupied, such as my mentor, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, my predecessor, John Fitzgerald Kennedy. These men, imperfect though they were, made a commitment to raise up the quality of life of lower income and working people of all colors. And it was my purpose as president on utilizing what was called the Great Society to carry on the work of Franklin Roosevelt's New Deal. The New Deal was not a perfect system. There was much racial segregation in the New Deal programs, such as with Social Security. Many job classifications were excluded from Social Security, including such as domestic workers and agricultural workers. By and large, and almost entirely, people of color. And I had noticed that in my position as Senate Majority Leader, happily working with the Eisenhower administration and even Republicans in the Senate, that we were able to, from that position, I saw the rise of the Civil Rights Movement. Martin Luther King, Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, leading boycotts of certain facilities that committed racial segregation. Despite the promise of Plessy versus Ferguson, the reality was separate was not at all equal in facilities between white and those who were called colored. And I saw the dedication and commitment and bravery of those civil rights activists, risking life and limb, literally, for the right to vote. Something that we take for granted, something that so many people fail to bother with. To vote for those persons who would affect our livelihoods, our communities. And so many people refuse to select that, not understanding that they would be affected by those decisions these office holders make. And I'm seeing, even in my home state of Texas, when Dallas was just this seething cauldron of racist violence, the John Birch Society was very powerful there. And there was even this poster of President Kennedy, like a wanted poster, calling him a traitor, worthy of death. And some fool, some maniac carried out that threat. And that is how I became President of the United States. I could not let Mr. Kennedy's death be in vain, nor also the deaths of the 3 civil rights workers, Schwerner, Goodman, and Cheney, who were murdered in Mississippi. And I'm sorry to say, the entire white population of Mississippi was virtually complicit in the murder of these 3 brave young men. In 1964, we managed to have passed through the Congress the Civil Rights Act, which guarantees equality in all and the end of segregation in all facilities, education, public restrooms, housing, moving into neighborhoods, restaurants, what have you. But unfortunately, due to the political horse trading that I'm used to, the right to vote was not included. But in that year, I ran for president for my own term, and I ran against Senator Barry Goldwater of Arizona. Really a fine, honorable man. But he refused to listen to the call to end segregation and injustice on a most trivial and narrow constitutional excuse. I have no idea what really motivated him. But the Klansmen and the racists and the John Birchers, they flocked to his banner. He was, as you say, their guy. And that was the end of the beginning of the end of the Republican Party I have been happy to work with. The so-called liberal and moderate elements were now on their way to decline. The people I was happy to work with and getting things done in the Congress. And the next year, 1965, I saw the March on Selma, where thousands of other brave and dedicated people, including the future Congressman John Lewis, again risked life and limb for the right to vote. And as they were approaching the Edmund Pettus Bridge, it seemed as if every law enforcement officer in the state attacked them with their batons and cracked the skull, literally, of Mr. Lewis. But fortunately, he survived and served his constituents honorably. That moved me. And from that struggle and sacrifice, I had the honor of signing the Voting Rights Act of 1965. And later on, I had the honor of appointing to the Supreme Court the first African American man, Thurgood Marshall, who originally served in my administration as Solicitor General, and who served in the NAACP's Legal Defense Fund. A man who also, even though utilizing the laws, risked his life. That's the pattern we have to face. Those who can't, the racists and segregationists of then and now, such as Mr. Trump, see that the laws aren't going to work their way. They're not going to be able to utilize the laws to repress and oppress and suppress civil rights activists of any stripe. So they're using brute force, either through police or so-called militiamen, glorified thugs, really. My friends, my fellow Americans, please do not let the sacrifice of these brave young men and women be in vain. Don't fall for the siren call of racial supremacy, so-called. Get out there and vote. Vote for your lives. Vote for your communities. Vote for the well-being of this country, because those who use racism as a propaganda tool, they don't care about you. They want you kept in ignorance and poverty for their benefit. Band together, people of all races, all genders, all classifications. Please get out there and vote. And now I yield the floor to Ms. Vivienne Crawford. Thank you. God bless America.
Thank you, John, and for your vivid interpretation of Lyndon Johnson. We have now, our next guest is Warren Cooper, who portrays on the show he's a member of the ensemble cast, as I told you, portrays Justice Thurgood Marshall. Welcome, Warren.
Thank you, Vivienne, and grace and peace to you all. My name is Warren Cooper, and it has been my honor on many occasions to channel Justice Thurgood Marshall through this Conversations Across Time wormhole that today gives me an interesting chance to share the stage, if you will, with someone in my own timeline, time zone. Great to see LBJ in the mix, and it's a good thing also for me personally to kind of flow between the lens of the voice that Thurgood Marshall might speak in, and also the one of my own voice, which really is moved to urgency about our need to engage. And one of the resonating things that I find with being able to channel Justice Thurgood Marshall is the ability to see what he's done in the context of what he might say about today. And looking forward, I believe what Justice Marshall would issue today is a call to voice. Thurgood Marshall, the Associate Justice of the Supreme Court of the United States, the 32nd Solicitor General of the United States, the Judge of the United States Court of Appeals and Second Circuit. He was born in Baltimore, Maryland, and graduated from the Frederick Douglass Public High School. He went to my father's alma mater, Lincoln University, where he hung out with the likes of Cab Calloway and Langston Hughes, going on to graduate from the Howard University School of Law, and as a lawyer in Baltimore, moved on to become the founder of the NAACP Legal Defense and Education Fund, and of course, ascending to the Supreme Court. It is a figure that speaks from things that have happened, things that he has done, but I am moved by a number of things in how he came to be in those positions. I will say editorially that the fact that Justice Marshall was succeeded by Clarence Thomas on the Supreme Court inspires two passionate reactions from me. One is, I wish that Thurgood would go back up into the Supreme Court, and I really do wish that a Thurgood would go back into the Supreme Court. Of course, the theater that we are experiencing now is predictable and unfortunately very American. And editorially speaking, neither you nor I can vote on a Supreme Court justice, but there are lots of things that we can vote on, and we are called in this moment to exercise that possibility. So hopefully all in eye and earshot of this broadcast will in fact not only avail yourselves of that opportunity, but indeed apply yourselves to helping others to do that too. But I feel like I technically digress. The second inspired, passionate reaction that I have to Clarence Thomas being the one to succeed Thurgood Marshall on the Supreme Court is not appropriate for this venue, so I'm not going to share that. But what I am going to share is the deep resonance that I find with Justice Marshall. I am indeed refreshed with every opportunity to channel his energy in this space. Many are inspired, and much has been made of the results connected to the Supreme Court justice used to be civil rights legal intern for the NAACP. It is a celebration that is beyond appropriate, and it's very important to remember all of the things that, in fact, he accomplished, particularly since so many of them are under active attack even as we speak. I am most impressed, however, and most informed by, and most inspired by the process in which those achievements were realized, by what made it possible for Thurgood Marshall to be in the right place at the right time with the right stuff. His accomplishments and the fruit of result that has been born for civil rights and for human rights and for moral dignity, all of those things must be noted. And what seems most relevant to me about his story is the base of his conviction and the manner in which and the place from which he moved. There are some quotations from him that frame this specifically. He says, "In recognizing the humanity of our fellow beings, we pay ourselves the highest tribute." Another quote reads, "To protest against injustice is the foundation of our American democracy." Another quote reads, "You do what you think is right, and you let the law catch up." And this quote, which speaks vividly to our present moment, he says, "History teaches that grave threats to liberty often come in times of urgency, when constitutional rights seem too extravagant to endure." I'm reminded of the 2001 Patriot Act, which in the wake of the fluffed fear of terrorism, which was not fluffed, I guess that's not fair, but it was the delivery mechanism for the relieving of our privacy even as we speak. COVID here in 2020 calls into question, among other things, the nature of our rights to or not to get the vaccine, whether we have the right to get tracked by our phones and have it kept track of everybody who we encounter. There's, of course, the threat to secured rights that are drifting into jeopardy. Roe v. Wade, Brown v. Board of Education, the Voting Rights Act, all of these things remain relevant. But what is most inspiring to me is that Thurgood Marshall's entire career was based on a goal-focused strategy offense. As much as he was a great lawyer, he was an equally talented strategist and general, authorizing and organizing a troop of justice in the war waged against uncivil rights, which would be for civil rights. He, and under the tutelage of his mentor, Charles Houston at the NAACP, they set two main targets in their sight from the very beginning. One was the separate but equal doctrine that saturated all laws that were in fact detrimental to Black lives, as they did not matter. And also the issue of segregation in education. When Thurgood Marshall took over the NAACP Special Counsel in 1938, he traveled to dangerous areas in the South in order to investigate lynchings and the denial of voting rights, jury service, and fair trials to Black, colored, African-American Negroes. All of these choices were strategic choices, moves that chiseled away in a chess game kind of way at the unjust structural impediments that were custom designed for Black, colored, African-American, Negro people. And in the presence of today's truths, it is in fact a one size fits all. The cases that they engaged were strategic. The Adams versus United States, the focused on the military as a structure that needed to recognize the humanity of African American. Smith versus Albright concerned the right to vote in 1944. The University of Oklahoma, Sipquill versus the University of Oklahoma, was a 1948 case where educational institutional discrimination was targeted specifically. Cooper versus Aaron, the backbone of the Little Rock Nine scenario as it unfolded so historically in Little Rock, Arkansas, and the Tinsley versus City of Richmond in 1961 that directly went after loitering laws as they were applied in a Jim Crow-esque era kind of way. The key elements of the playbook that they were using also for me bear noting because of the situation we find ourselves in today. A key play in the playbook is to use the system to improve the system with a human rights focused vision of what the system was intended to be. A second key play that occurs to me was present is choose your steps according to their orientation of the strategic goal. Every case that they took, every angle that they pursued in their arguments in that legal defense and education fund, all of those were set on the goals of taking power away from the separate but equal doctrine and the issues of segregation in education. And the third that seems most relevant for this moment is to be open and firm in your alliances. Justice Marshall's alliance with Justice Brennan in the court was responsible for many human-focused issues that have unfolded. The aspect of his connection with J. Edgar Hoover, well, that's another interesting thing, but it matches the strategy that must be called for today. It seems that we are being called today into a focused strategic perseverance in our effort to do what is right. In this moment, we have to know the play, it seems. And I would say, I wish a Thurgood would go back into the Supreme Court, into the Board of Education, into the legislature, and into the bodega store, and into the ballot voting booth box. I wish a Thurgood would, and I bet Thurgood wishes a Thurgood would too. I'm going to close with this quotation that's taken from a 1976 celebration of the United States bicentennial. Justice Marshall says, this government they devised was defective from the start, requiring several amendments, a civil war, and major social transformation to attain the system of constitutional government and its respect for the individual freedoms and human rights we hold so fundamental today. He goes on to say, the Constitution as a living document included the Bill of Rights and other amendments protecting individual freedoms and human rights. And not a part of his quotation, but I imagine what he'd say today. It is this ever-evolving America that we must defend. Cast your vote like it's your last vote, because of me.
Warren, I thank you. I thank you so much for that overview. And at this point, I'd like to thank all of our panelists. And as we are wont to do, if we have a quote from Thomas Jefferson that is very appropriate for the dissertation that Warren just gave us in terms of talking about the Constitution and talking about the laws. And we ask you to pay attention to that. We ask you to vote as though your lives depended on it. And I'd like all of the panel members to come back in if you would. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, John.
Hey, my pleasure. Anytime.
Thank you,
everybody.
Tim.
Within the sound of our voice, get out
there and vote.
You.
Yes. Is there any final words? Any final words that anyone wants to say?
Vote.
Vote. Vote. Vote. Vote. Vote.
Vote.
And that concludes that concludes this episode. But you know, our passion is to motivate you to vote because you know it's important. You understand that. And I don't want you to be dissuaded because, you know, they often say that folk don't come out to vote when it rains, whatever the weather is. I don't care if there's snow. Get out there and vote. You can vote early if you like. We did some shows on that, but we're asking you to make sure that you vote. And if we will end with the quote from Thomas Jefferson and say and bid you adieu. Thank you very much. This has been Vivienne Crawford for Conversations Across Time. My guests have been Warren Cooper as Thurgood Marshall, John Mason as Lyndon Johnson, Kimberly Gandy as Mamie Till, Mark Hoffman as Ulysses Grant, and Mark Hoffman, Conversations Across Time show historian. Thank you so much. And our heart beats in hopes that you will go out and you will vote. Please get everyone that you know to vote. Thank you very much.